just under 2-year-old son fell down in the kitchen. He had just started talking, and 5 minutes before he fell, he said, "I hurt," and fell over. We thought he was being silly, but he said it 4 more times. Finally, my wife took him to the kitchen to have a popsicle. It was like 8 a.m., but whatever. She stood him up and he literally fell over. Then he tried to talk, but it was baby talk gibberish. We rushed him to the pediatrician. As we were waiting, I noticed that one side of his face was drooping. I said, "Looks like a stroke." The pediatrician, who showed up at some point, said, "No way, highly unlikely for a 1-year-old." They ran tests for what felt like days, but was probably more like 10 minutes. I kept saying his left arm is dropping now and his face is fully strobed out. Finally, my wife stood up with him in her arms and yells, "Fuck this, I'm driving him to Children's Hospital." The pediatrician kept telling us to go to a different hospital because he had admitting permission or whatever. They also tried to get us to take an ambulance but said it would take 15 min. We ran out, buckled him into his seat and drove like a race car driver to Children's. They took him in and there was immediately like 40 doctors in the room. They ran all kinds of tests in seconds. Guess what? Stroke. He was having a hemorrhagic stroke from a burst capillary in his brainstem. He was dying, like for real. If we had stayed at the pediatrician's, he would have died. It was terrifying. Those ER doctors at Children's Hospital saved his life. They were brilliant. I barely remember the day. But at some point, the doctors at Children's asked questions like, "Was he struck? Do you hit him?" etc. We realized later that they were attempting to discern if we caused it by hitting him in the head. The burst capillary was actually so deep a hit on the head wouldn't have caused it, per his neurologist. We spent nearly 3 months in patent, including a harrowing week in the NICU. He worked really hard at walking, mostly thanks to the musicians who go to the hospital and play for the kids. Every time they were there, he wanted to dance, and he did a ton of work every week just to be able to dance when they played live music. Fast forward. He is 8 and healthy as an ox. He has drop foot and a very weak left hand, but he is so good. Many of the outcomes that were possible were much, much, much worse than his slightly weak left hand and slight drop foot. The neurologist told us one time that they are fairly confident that he was going to be left-handed because of where the stroke happened. Apparently, if he had been right-handed, his speech could have been affected much worse. Anyway, that shit was terrifying. We had a 2-month-old baby with us as well. We spent years traveling to and from Children's Hospital for therapy and appointments. We just had his last appointment with the neurologist last week. They said, "We don't need to see you guys again," which is a good thing. It's not coming back, and his scans all look amazing. When I was 16, I ran away due to my mother being an alcoholic. She was laying into me with words real hard one night, so I decided to stay with my aunt and uncle for 3 days. My uncle told my mom where I was and that they think it's best if things calm down before I go back home. When they dropped me off, I knew she was going to be mad because now I've embarrassed her in front of people for spilling our dirty laundry. When I walked in the door, I was greeted with an angry face and an angry tone to match. "Your chores have been sitting here. Get your fucking ass downstairs and start with the cat box." Mind you, I didn't shower in the 3 days because I was a depressive mess. I know, gross. So I replied calmly as I'm heading for the stairs to my upstairs bathroom. "I haven't showered. I'll do it after my shower." Wrong answer. "You'll fucking get in here and do it now. Who do you think you're talking to?" she roared. After I take a shower. I can still hear her feet pounding on the kitchen floor, running towards me. She's screaming at me, and I book it to my bathroom and lock it shut. She had gotten up the stairs so fast, I didn't even have time to get a good grip on the doorknob. Bam, bam. She's pounding on the door. Bam, 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 bam. The door is shaking. I'm crying. I'm terrified. Bam, bam, bam. Crack, c. The door comes flying off the hinges, and she grabs me by the hair, dragging me out into the hall. "What did you say, huh? What did you say, you bitch?" she yells. She picks me up, still by the hair, and throws me onto my back and into the ground. Before I could react, she sits on me. Her weight is crushing my lungs. I'm struggling, trying to fight. She then takes her forearm and pushes it into my throat, harder and harder. I'm screaming and crying uncontrollably, begging her to stop. "You are nothing. I am in charge. I am the parent. I fucking own you." Proceeding to put her full weight on me and dig deeper into my throat, I freeze and go numb. I'm going to die. I thought over and over, please, please, someone help me. I don't want to die. I remember thinking that what felt like hours were only minutes, but I thought I was going to die. And the only time I ever felt like I was going to die. She finally got off of me. And before I could know what breathing felt like again, I instantly, thank you, adrenaline, shot up and pushed her hard. She slipped down a few stairs, catching herself completely, and called the police. After their investigation partnered with DCF, after telling them what happened, what's been happening, they labeled me as an out-of-control teenager, and I was put on probation for a year, on top of being grounded for a year. No electronics, no outside, no friends. And a part of me died that day because not only was I completely terrified of dying, but also terrified from the fact that I would live in fear for 15 more years, even after moving out at 18. Last year, and this have been me healing from it and plenty of other trauma. But it was the scariest moment of my life. My job, senior living community, is sort of a string of horrifying incidents scattered randomly across the most boring job ever. I work alone 99% of the time, so you kind of get used to these things. But in terms of sheer fear levels, Buddy was one of my favorite residents. I'm not supposed to have favorites, but I treat everyone fair, and I'm only human. He was also a lifelong smoker with very bad COPD. He was also schizophrenic and had been struggling a lot lately after his meds stopped working. I think he just fell out of rhythm taking them, and then his particular pattern of thinking off meds made it hard to get back on schedule. He acted weird, and the other residents reacted badly, and then that made him paranoid, so he acted more weird, and then that set off a resident with anger issues, until it was this nasty, vicious cycle, and he'd literally broke down crying on my desk multiple times about the bullying he'd faced his entire life. Basically, an older man with pre-existing health conditions and risk factors under an abnormal amount of stress. We are an independent living community. There's no medical staff. I'm not allowed to administer any treatment, including CPR. When something bad happens, we're like any other apartment complex. We wait for 911 to come. Someone came zooming up in a power chair to the desk from the designated smoking area to tell me the resident had fallen in the parking lot and wouldn't get back up. I go out there, and he is lying on the asphalt with a small pool of blood around his head, counting. It's not really in order. The numbers go in sequence for a bit, backwards and forwards, and then he restarts somewhere else. It's always awkward to lean over someone, so I kneel next to him and say his name a few times. Buddy. Hey, buddy. Can you hear me, buddy? Gracia? Hey, buddy. Don't try to move. Can you tell me what's hurting? I can't get up. I was walking, just walking, cool, calm, and collected. I'm allowed to walk. You're not in trouble. It looks like you hit your head. Is anything else hurting? My back. I call 911 and ask them to come as quickly as possible. It's okay, buddy. They're gonna come help you. Then I stand up to call my boss, stepping away a little so my resident doesn't have to hear business Graca appear. I give him the rundown. He then asks me if I think the police should be called out too, since the resident has schizophrenia and that's considered a risk factor. I was actually dreading this question, mostly because I expected it to be in order. Luckily, my boss trusts us to make judgment calls. I tell him the cops aren't needed, and he confirms that's a good call, and I go back to sit with Buddy. Not too long now, okay? We'll be able to hear the sirens soon. He lifts a hand and points just past the street lamp and asks me if I see the angels past the light, alternating that with the same counting as before, growing more and more distressed. For a minute, I am dead certain his hand is going to drop, like in the movies. The pool of blood is getting bigger. Head wounds bleed a lot, so I'm sitting here rationalizing that. But I'm also worried about his spine, about blood pooling somewhere more important than the asphalt, about whether he's breathing enough like this with his COPD. I'm wondering why the fuck this is even my job. I mean, I majored in Latin for fuck's sake. I'm wondering if anyone else still has enough patience for him to kneel on the pavement saying soothing nonsense. I tell him to just focus on me. Help will be here soon. I know this is scary. And sure enough, a minute or so later, the paramedics roll up. I flag them down and quickly explain that he's counting nonsensically and reporting seeing angels, but that he's also schizophrenic and struggling with medication, and it's hard to say what's head injury and what's normal, buddy. The paramedics were incredible. So friendly with Buddy, explaining everything to him before they did it. I was in the weird adrenaline stage where my emotions were all over the place, but externally, I was still calm. I folded my hands behind my back so they'd stop shaking while I stood back and instructed residents to stop rubbernecking, and after they cut off his clothes and loaded him onto a board, they handed me a bag, his shoes, his cut-open socks, shirt, jeans, his belt, his lanyard with bus pass and key cards. Can you take that back to his apartment? He shares his apartment with his elderly mother. Yeah, I say. I'll take them there. They bundle him off to the hospital, I tell myself. It's a good sign he's going to the podunk local place and not getting airlifted to a big hospital. And then I knock on his mother's door to tell her I don't know when he'll be home and pass her the somewhat horrifying bag of destroyed clothing. She cries. Somehow I manage to mostly not cry. I must have spent 10 minutes down there just telling her the doctors will do everything they can, we'll figure out a way to get him home, while she's wailing. But how will he get home? They left his bus pass. I can't drive. Eventually, I can calm her down and go back to my desk, where my job is once again extremely boring. Paperwork to fill out, cameras to watch, missed calls to return, and no news on Buddy for a week, since in those days I worked weekends only. I have to admit, when the adrenaline crash finally hit after I did all my paperwork, I closed the office window for 5 minutes and had a fully fledged panic attack. Buddy recovered from that head injury, and we stayed on good terms despite him faking a heart attack on me until he was moved to a full-time care facility and later passed away. His mother still calls the desk while I'm working on holidays. R.I.P. Buddy, my good buddy, who gave me 2 of the scariest nights of my life. In modern times, half the men in America have war stories about Iraq and Afghanistan. But my scariest one was working a suicide vest post-blast in Tarmiya, Iraq in 2008. Tarmiya was renowned as the shit show of central Iraq at that time. Basically, a no-man's land that we only nominally had control over. We had a FOB, Forward Operating Base, in Tarmiya, but our presence in town consisted of getting through the streets in and out of town as quickly as possible while running missions. IEDs everywhere, sniper fire at the FOB guard towers on a weekly basis, the Hearts and Minds campaign abandoned. So, something that frequently happens with a suicide vest is that the head of the person wearing the vest detaches from the spinal column and shoots up into the air. This is actually beneficial from an intel perspective because the face often remains largely intact, so the suicide bomber can be identified. And being able to identify a suicide bomber is significant for obvious reasons. So, we found the spine with most of the upper torso, larger chunks of other body parts, but nothing we can really use to ID the bomber. We're on one of the main streets in Tarmiya with 2 3-story buildings lining the street, fist-sized chunks of flesh scattered all over the street for about 100 yards in both directions. A smoldering Mercedes off to the side, the target of the suicide bomber, destroyed bodies in the Mercedes, a woman wailing over the bodies of her 3 children laying in body bags in her front yard, dirt. It's just a scene out of a horror movie. A significant risk with IEDs is secondary IEDs. IEDs rigged deliberately so that once American forces arrive at a post-blast scene, they get booby-trapped by a secondary IED. So, while we have to watch every step to make sure we're not stepping on chunks of human flesh, we also have to watch out for secondary IEDs, and we have to keep a directed presence, weapons pointed at the second and third story windows of the surrounding buildings to try to ward off sniper fire. And we have to find the human head. We can't leave until we locate the head. And now the sun is setting. So, we hypothesize that the head may have been blown off the body at an angle, over the buildings and into a palm grove cultivated date trees behind the buildings. We organize a search party for the palm grove resembling the search parties for missing people. We're going to walk 5 feet apart out and back for the entire length of the palm grove, about 100 yards, using our NOD standard issue night vision goggles to look for the head. The insurgency loved to hide their weapons caches in palm groves, because they're such a pain in the ass to search, and they're almost always within walking distance of their homes, so a lot of palm groves were booby-trapped. Plus, now that it's dark, the sniper risk has increased exponentially. And in our AO area of operation, they had recently begun using this new technique, I can't remember what it was called, where they would rig an IED to a small parachute, loft the IED at American forces, and be 100 yards down the road before the IED impacted. We actually once had one land in the camo netting on top of our vehicle while we were in it, that thankfully failed to detonate. Being in a palm grove right behind a 3-story building, someone could simply throw a parachute-rigged IED out a window and be gone before it landed. So, there was that risk as well. Anyway, to make very long story shorter, as we made the trek down and back through the palm grove in the dark, in 100-degree heat, looking for the human head, thinking that there was a 5% chance that every step we took could be our last, my fear wasn't dying. It was, I don't want to die here, like this, in this miserable, dark place. I don't want the last emotion I feel to be. I'm in a living hell on earth. In both body and mind, it was probably the darkest place I've ever been. A couple of hours later, around midnight, a helicopter located the head on a rooftop. When I was a freshman in high school. Actually, the second day of my freshman year started. My parents left 16-year-old me home alone in the middle of the country with my 14-year-old brother as they both worked third shift. As I was trying to sleep, maybe around 12 to 1 a.m., I suddenly heard a loud boom, 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 crash. My house shook and the windows briefly light up. I convinced myself I must have imagined it as my brother didn't wake up. However, a few minutes later, boom, boom, a loud slamming on my home's back door. I got up to investigate. My brother's still sleeping. There was a man on the other side of the door, trying to get in the house. "Please help, I need to call my daddy," he yelled over and over. He was far too old to be calling someone daddy outside of the bedroom. Me being an idiot kid, I told him I'd hand him a phone so he could call his dad. First, I called 911 and my father. I then opened the door just a crack to hand him my dad's new prized cordless phone, which was a big deal at the time. As I slipped the phone through the crack, he grabbed my arm firmly and said, "You better not have called the police. I need my daddy, and you better not call the police." It's at this time I get my first good look at him. He's covered in blood from head to toe. I panicked and started slamming the door on my own arm, trying to dislodge his grip. Thankfully, he was so bloody he couldn't maintain good grip, and I slammed and locked the door. I sat with my back at the door trying to keep him out. He sat on the other side trying to call his dad. But he couldn't figure out the phone, so he apologized before and asked if I could call his daddy. I knew I needed my dad's phone back, so I stupidly opened the door and called the number he asked. The phone was drenched in blood. I called his dad, who was mad I called so late. I told him his son was in an accident and he demanded to speak to his son. I hand the phone back and get back to blocking the door. I can hear the conversation. "Daddy, it happened again. Daddy, I'm sorry, Daddy. You gotta get her now. Daddy, it happened again." A few other things were said I couldn't hear. He then offered the phone back again. Now my guard was down and I reached out again. This time he grabs me hard, pulling me most the way out. I'm holding on my just the door as he tries to drag me out. "Come here, boy, I just want to thank you. I need to thank you for your help, come here." He, at this point, is punching me, so I let go of the door. I'm screaming for my brother to help, but he is still sleeping. Sleeping through my screams and a burning car 15 feet away from his bedroom window. While my brother was useless, the lights and sirens of the police could now be seen heard coming over the hill. The blood-covered man now hitting me in the head, screaming, "I told you not to call the police!" I now see that his is completely unharmed. No injury to himself. It's not his blood. As the cop cars pulled in, he released his grasp and ran away into the cornfields that surrounded Lye property. The police came to the door to find me now covered in mine and someone else's blood. They are asking me questions about what happened and what I seen. I try to tell them he has ran into the fields. Before long, the fire department was there putting out the car. The man is still unfound and dozens of cop cars are using spotlights on the fields. My father arrives and they won't let him to our property while they are looking for the guy. The road is blocked. My dad then gets in his big truck and blows past the roadblock into the cornfield and drives towards our house. This was enough to scare the blood-covered man out of the field and back into our property. 5 police chase him and can't seem to catch him, but he jumps the fence into our dog pen. We had 2 Dobermans. My dog, Stereo Dolby Stereo, tore into him long enough for the police to catch him. After they hauled him away, the police proceeded to ask me and my dad questions until the sun was up. They took forever to clean the road. The sheriff shows up and asks me, "Did he say anything about the other girls? And did you see another woman?" I knew nothing, but my father and my finally awake brother watched as they removed one body from the trunk of the car. I went to shower off while the remaining cleanup took place. When I got out, another officer asked me very similar questions about a girl or girls. When they left, my father was so mad that I let the guy use his phone that he still sent me to school. That set the pace for my entire year. I didn't sleep at night for a few years. And after that, it was still difficult. Every time I'd close my eyes, I'd hear the pounding on the doors. It wasn't until I moved out that I was finally able to sleep a full night. But I still weekly think about that blood-covered guy and his daddy, and the girls. I can't remember how I attacked her, but I took the weak, dying cat from her hands and ran as fast as I could to doors of the basement, my heart beating out of my chest. As light hit me, noise of fear and sadness finally came out as I noticed the cat was my Ginge, its silhouette unrecognizable from the days of unattendance. As soon as I got out of the basement, I ran home with Ginge still in my arms, not looking back in fear of seeing Macy sprint towards me. It took me a while, but I finally made it home. I remember the door open, but I can't remember anything that happened after that. The entire rest of that day was completely blanked out of my mind. I've recovered from that day, but I now have extreme trust issues. Reading this back, it sounds unbelievable that someone could get away with this, but I never told anyone, as I told my mother that Ginge was trapped, but I didn't specify. I was too scared, and I didn't want to see her again. Ginge recovered from whatever abuse he suffered, but he wasn't the same cat again. If you have any questions, please ask them. Again, this story is very broken and hazy. I'm sorry. I just needed to get this story out there. When I was in primary school, my best friend was this semi-tall Russian girl, calling her Macy. Even though I had other friends in school, it was mostly me and her. We were the same age, but she looked more like an older sister, and I, an only and lonely child, saw her as one. Basically, I trusted her with my life. She lacked excellent English and did not come across as friendly, almost intimidating to others, even if they didn't admit it. So she did not have a lot of friends, IRK. Despite us being close friends, she could be extremely rough and didn't know her own strength, causing me to cry at times. When I was crying, she would not comfort me, but just stare at me with an "Are you done yet?" expression, and sometimes even continue while I was begging her to stop. Even after this, I still loved her with all my heart. There was never a time when she smiled or didn't have the same deadpan expression when we spoke, or during any activity I knew she was enjoying, Irchi. Her love for animals was beyond compare, to their detriment. Anyways, ramble over. I remember overhearing a conversation with my mother and her friends, talking about multiple cats going missing and one dog. There were no suspects, but why would there be? The police have more to worry about than cats supposedly running away. This terrified me as an 11-year-old boy because my cute British short-haired Ginge was one of my only close friends. I remember getting up, running downstairs, and opening the door to see her, Macy, sitting down cross-legged on the street just outside the path to my house, facing me with Ginge sitting on her lap. Her eyes already fixed on my mind before opening the door. We get into a dialogue about cats, how long she was there, etc. As I brought up the disappearing cats, she didn't blink for the entire conversation. As I was talking about Ginge, she interrupted me with something said in Russian, then left, not bothering to think about Ginge that was dropped from her lap as she stood up to walk away. Despite her cold demeanor, she had never walked away from me like that. The next day, Ginge didn't show up for breakfast, or the next day, or the next day, or the next day. Needless to say, I was scared for my cute little fur ball. The end of my 6th year of primary school was coming up, but I still couldn't get my cat off of my mind. After 3 p.m., Macy was walking out of the school gates, and I caught up to her, as usual. In the midst of venting to Macy about my cat not appearing, her usual quiet listening attitude changed. She suddenly stopped walking and jolted her head in the direction of mine, moving so uncomfortably close to me that I could feel her breathing on the skin of my face. She simply told me to follow her, as I was already doing, but this time she was acting more sketchy and walking faster. She led me to her house, which was a few blocks away from mine, so I still felt comfortable with her. She led me to a set of doors on the floor behind her house, her basement. Now, this is where I asked what that putrid smell that was protruding from the basement doors, and she just stared at me again, but this time said nothing. Macy beckoned me over with her finger, unlocked the basement, and opened it. As she opened up the doors, the smell of death hit me like a truck and blinded me for what was about 15 seconds. During the time I was unable to open my eyes, Macy grabbed my arm and squeezed it. My memory is hazy during this time, so I am unable to describe accurately what I saw. My memory tells me I saw about a dozen animals, familiar pets, ones that I've seen and touched before, in a scrawny, rotting state. I cannot begin to describe the feeling of seeing things you've seen and touched, dead, rotting, some even decapitated. I threw up, with Macy still gripping onto me and now leading me down the basement. It took me a while to start moving on my own, and when I did start moving, my first instinct was to cry and run away, which I soon realized I could not do. Macy, still gripping onto me tight and leading me down into the dark basement, me trying to run, opening my mouth to scream and cry, but nothing coming out. I was ready to start fighting until a raspy, sad meow coming from the darkness left me silent. I remember becoming paralyzed with fear once again when Macy screamed something in Russian to the direction of the meow, tossing me aside onto something metal, then stomping forward. I remember her picking that cat up and shaking it around, still screaming at it. I eventually regained control of my body, but seeing that cat being treated so badly, not wanting something bad to happen to it, I lost control of my body again and ran towards Macy. Despite the gory scene around me, I think my rage overpowered my fear. I can't remember how I attacked her, but I took the weak, dying cat from her hands and ran as fast as I could to doors of the basement, my heart beating out of my chest. As light hit me, noise of fear and sadness finally came out as I noticed the cat was my Ginge, its silhouette unrecognizable from the days of unattendance. As soon as I got out of the basement, I ran home with Ginge still in my arms, not looking back in fear of seeing Macy sprint towards me. It took me a while, but I finally made it home. I remember the door open, but I can't remember anything that happened after that. The entire rest of that day was completely blanked out of my mind. I've recovered from that day, but I now have extreme trust issues. Reading this back, it sounds unbelievable that someone could get away with this, but I never told anyone, as I told my mother that Ginge was trapped, but I didn't specify. I was too scared and I didn't want to see her again. Ginge recovered from every abuse he suffered, but he wasn't the same cat again. If you have any questions, please ask them. Again, this story is very broken and hazy. I'm sorry. I just needed to get this story out there. My story isn't as terrifying as some people's, but I thought I would put it here anyway. I took my dog out for a walk before bed because it was going to rain and I didn't want her tracking in mud through the dog door. Keep in mind, I was 11 at the time. We had a pretty large piece of property that went into the woods. My dog always liked longer walks and it took her some time to do her business. We had 2 dogs at the time, Abby and Gracie. Abby was Gracie's biological mom. Gracie had just turned a year old a few weeks previously to this event. The walk started out relatively normal as we went further back into my savanna-scaped backyard with lots of cedar and Spanish oak trees. Eventually, Abby was no longer walking beside us, which I thought was weird but wasn't too uncommon. Then Gracie wouldn't stop cowering under my legs, which really started to freak me out. Eventually, I heard a bunch of footsteps around me with a strange dog-like cackle. In this moment, I thought, shit, coyotes. I was too far back into my backyard, about 10 acres in, for me to run back to the house. Abby was nowhere to be found, and she was our 90-pound guard dog. Gracie had always been a coward, so she would be no help. When I tell you this wasn't just 1 or 2 coyotes, it was a horde of coyotes ganging up on me and my little dog Gracie. All I could do was pick up a few of the rocks and hold them tightly as all these coyotes circled around me. I don't exactly know what was going on, but there was also a freaking mountain lion. I was not only terrified, but confused as to why a mountain lion was with a bunch of coyotes and why they were hanging up on me in the first place. I immediately thereafter realized the coyotes were not interested in me, but interested in my dog Gracie. She had started her heat a few days before. Prey for the mountain lions in my area had been scarce recently, so it was likely after the coyotes as a last resort. This entire extravaganza was just a Mother Nature flipping me off. The next few seconds were hell for me. I was tense and scared as a young 11-year-old. Eventually, I just picked up the heaviest rocks I could find and started throwing them wherever I could see, a faint figure of a coyote in the darkness. Wasn't entirely sure what happened to the mountain lion. My flashlight was too dim. Finally, my dog Abby showed up. When I tell you, she turned into a freaking demon. I'm not lying. There must have been 20 coyotes at the very least. I'm not exaggerating. They wanted my dog Gracie likely to mate with her. These guys weren't going away without a fight. All I could do is scream and throw rocks like a little girl, while my 90 lb dog Abby took on 20 freaking coyotes. Eventually, when I saw an opening, I ran like hell back to my house. At first, the coyotes were chasing after me because Gracie was also with me, but I let go of her leash because I was too terrified and also extremely cowardly as a kid. Abby didn't need have a leash. Abby had followed me back while trying to defend me from coyotes, and Gracie hadn't actually left my side. Abby had just scared most of them away. She was a badass dog. Abby had literally dragged back a freaking leg of a coyote. What the fuck? My father ran over to me when he heard my screams when I got close enough to the house with his shotgun. A few coyotes were still trying to follow, but they cowered away once they heard the gunshot my dad had fired. Seeing coyotes in my part of the countryside wasn't abnormal, but a whole horde of them was extremely uncommon, much less with a freaking mountain lion. Thankfully, all I really had was a bruised butt from falling over and scraped legs, otherwise unharmed. Gracie's back had been scratched up a bit, and Abby was an absolute mess, mostly from fucking up the coyotes. I mean, blood everywhere. She had to spend a few days at the vet to recover from her injuries. I don't leave from my backyard at night without my shotgun anymore. Whether or not you believe this story is completely up to you. but to me, it's completely real. This just tells me how strong a male's sex drive can be. Jeez. I have quite a few because sadly I'm one of those dumb people that do dumb shit and somehow manage to skate out of it alive. I'm older now and a little less dumb, but I still get into situations from time to time that honestly could turn bad easily. One that sticks out in my mind in particular was a time I decided to sneak out with a friend, we'll call her Jay. Now, I'd snuck out many times before this, usually to do dumb kid shit like smoking pot, drinking beer, hanging out with boys, thing rebellious teens do. A little backstory here, my friend's mom was a tweaker. Hell, she's still off and on drugs to this day. A couple weeks before Jay and I snuck out, long story short, her mom and dad had accidentally left me at a bar in the middle of the night. I started walking to a different friend's house to get a ride home, and Jay called to ask where I was. She said her parents would come get me. Cue getting picked up, yelled at, tweaker mom flipping out and hitting Jay, father trying to stop it and swerving all over the road when it's foggy and pitch black, Jay's younger siblings screaming and crying, me trying to grab the baby, etc. Mom jumps out of car. We stop and try to get her to get back in. She blames me, attacks me, I run. We eventually get back to their house. I call my parents in the morning, who are, very obviously, beyond furious. So, as I'm sure you could imagine, Jay and I weren't supposed to be hanging out. Where I lived at the time, it was a 5-minute walk to the highway, then across the highway to a trailer park, down to the back of the trailer park, across the river, and upstream a few minutes, and then up a hill to Jay's house. In all, the trek would take less than 20 minutes, and it was easy for me to sneak out. We hadn't seen each other in a while and didn't want to get caught, so we decided to make the 30-minute walk into town. The town we lived in is small and hasn't had a police force for a long time. It's not a horrible town, but like many these days, drugs sort of took over, and once the sun goes down, there are tweakers everywhere. We didn't care, of course, because we were dumb, young, and just wanted to walk to the park and smoke some pot and hang out. So what's the worst that could happen? Shortly after entering town, we hear someone behind us. We walk a little faster, but they pick up pace until they're directly behind us. Jay spins around to see who it is, and it's a woman. Not much taller than us, obviously high and beat to hell. Shocked, we ask her if she's okay. She said she'll be all right, but was scared of her boyfriend and was wondering if we'd walk with her to a friend's house so she wouldn't be alone. Yeah, sure, of course. 2 17-year-old girls can definitely protect you. We start walking. We were on the far southern edge of town, and it was maybe 10 minutes to the 24 gas station, who she said her friend lived behind. After about 5 minutes of silence, she asks our names, how old we are. We lie, of course, and asks what we're doing out that night. We start to walk past one of the restaurants in town when a truck flies by and we narrowly dodge being hit. We try to grab the woman and leave, but she shrugs us off and starts yelling. The driver got out, and it's her boyfriend. He starts screaming at her to get in the truck, they're leaving, etc. She says no and starts yelling back. My friend and I had some small pocket knives, and we looked at each other and gripped them. I start to pull mine out when 2 more guys come out from behind the restaurant. At this point, I'm scared, really scared. The woman and her boyfriend continue to argue. After a few minutes, she says, "I'm hanging out with my friends. I'll see you later." She puts her arms around us and we start walking. Once we round the corner, she starts walking faster, nearly running, and we hear her boyfriend yell, "I'll kill you. I'll fucking kill all of you." Then we ran. We made it to the gas station and watched her run to the street behind and go into her friend's house. Jay and I, of course, have no fucking clue what we're gonna do. We go inside the gas station for a bit, hoping that the guys wouldn't be dumb enough to go in since there'd be witnesses. After about 15 minutes, we went outside again and didn't see or hear anything, so we started walking. It was a couple blocks to the park, and we made it there without incident. There is a small covered stage in the middle of the park, so we walked over and sat down toward the back of the stage and proceeded to smoke, laugh, joke, and try to forget what happened. 40 or so minutes go by, and we're thinking about heading home when we hear it. those guys' voices. One says, "It's dark as fuck, should I go check here?" The other responds, "Yeah, we'll go look for them. Just yell if you see anything." We panic. We sneak off the stage out the back and run to the back of the park. We sneak around the baseball diamond and run out the side lot of the park. The we time in panic mode, trying to figure out what the fuck we were going to do. We decide to just go home and hope that maybe they were just looking for someone else. We start walking. We get a few minutes outside of town and we hear a car coming. We turn around and it's the boyfriend's truck. He speeds up and we run and dive into the ditch as he swerves onto the shoulder. We quickly scramble up the side of the ditch into the woods and run through the trees trying to stay out of view. He kept driving and turned around a couple times to drive by again, but eventually gave up and left. Why he didn't get out of the truck and follow us up into the trees I do not know, and am beyond thankful to this day that he didn't. We do eventually make it home safely. Jay calls me a few days later and says her mom heard from some tweaker friends that they were looking for two girls who looked like us. I didn't leave the house for nearly a month and got a short haircut because I was so paranoid. I've left out some details in case someone I know finds this, but to this day I still think about how that could have gone far worse. Thanks for spending your time here. I hope you enjoyed the stories. If you did, feel free to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.